Welcome to Scrambled, your space for fertility, owning your 30s, and the scramble that makes it all worth it.
All right, welcome back to Scrambled, everybody. We're really excited about today's conversation. Joining us today is Sydney Graves, a midwife and a hypnobirthing instructor based in Melbourne, Australia. Sydney is here to help us unpack the world of pregnancy and birth and to share her experience working as a midwife in both the UK and Australia. So far on Scrambled, we've spent a lot of time talking about conceiving a child, and now we're excited to shift the conversation towards the incredible process of bringing those babies into the world. Sydney's here to share her knowledge, experience, and insights with us. Sydney, welcome to Scrambled.
Hello, thank you. This is exciting. I've not done a podcast in ages.
We're so excited to have you. So you and I recently met in Australia. I was home, which was a much needed trip for me because it was like middle of winter New York. Flew home to Australia, had 2 weeks there with my friends and family, and you and I met at a wedding. We were introduced by the bride, and I was straight away like, you have to come on my podcast. So thank you for agreeing to be here.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, well, Sydney, tell us about yourself and your career and what drove you across the world from the UK to Australia.
So I've been a midwife since it's like coming up to 10 years now. 2016, I qualified. And I worked in the UK in a couple of different hospitals, a high-risk hospital, a smaller hospital, and I really enjoyed it. And there was actually nothing wrong with my life. But then my friend died of cancer when she was 30. And that just changed my perspective. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? How do I want to live my life? Am I happy with it how it is now? If I died tomorrow, would I be happy? And then I was like, no, I think I want to go and do more stuff. So then I got a job. They were desperate for midwives in Australia. And I was like, they speak the same language. Ideal. I can go over and it's pretty much the same role. And then, moved over to Australia, worked for about a year. I've been doing hypnobirthing, which is like parent education. It's changing your mindset around birth. And I've done that for about 5 years. And I stopped for maybe about a year when I first arrived in Melbourne. And then I've started it again and it's just like massively took off. So I've completely left my job as a midwife and now I'm just doing online hypnobirth. And I'm actually getting together a virtual course at the minute. It's hopefully going to be out in April, but everything takes forever. So we'll see.
Can you talk to us about what a midwife is? Now, it's funny because I feel like for people listening in Australia, that's going to be a familiar term, but maybe here in the US, it's less familiar. They might have heard of things like a doula, an obstetrician, a labor and delivery nurse, but what's a midwife?
So a midwife is a nurse that's specialized in pregnancy, childbirth, and post-birth. We are like the most equipped to look after women who are giving birth, who are low risk, that don't need medical intervention. So we will be there in the labor and delivery or the birth room. Whether that's a home birth, we would just be there as midwives, no medical team. So we can do all of that. We can suture the vagina, we can deliver the placenta, we can deliver the baby. The only things that we can't do is more medical intervention. So forceps deliveries, ventouse deliveries, like more when women require assistance, basically, or cesarean sections. But there's actually in the UK some new roles coming out where midwives can actually train to assist with cesarean sections. So it just kind of depends where you are. But the reason why I moved to Australia and why it was so not easy, it was still hard, but it is even going from one hospital to another within the same country. But obviously, as a role as a midwife in Australia to the UK, it's very, very similar. Apart from the midwives in the UK are a lot more, they're more overqualified, as in we do more stuff at university, like suturing and stuff like that, or sewing up, as you call it. But in Australia, it's not really a thing. They don't really have to do that. So the midwife is an advocate for the woman that specializes purely in pregnancy, low risk birth, and then postnatal period and looking after the mum and the baby. So we can prescribe medication, we can give drugs. So we're kind of slightly not above a nurse, but we can do more than what a nurse can do because we can make care pathways and nurses can't.
I was trying to explain that to Alyssa so for example, I've said to her, like, I would be nervous giving birth in the US only because it's so different to the model that I knew and understood in Australia, because I feel like medical intervention here, because doctors are more involved, is more probable versus in the Australian setting that I have seen, women can have births very tailored to the way they design with their midwife that doesn't need so much medical intervention. However, if it gets to the point that that's needed, they're still in a hospital setting and a doctor can be called and they can go down that path if necessary.
So many of our listeners obviously are trying to conceive or in the process of conceiving. What can people do to better prepare their bodies for pregnancy, for a healthy pregnancy?
Do you know what? It's actually not always about the body. It's more about the mind. And I think so I have a lot of women who have gone through IVF or troubles or had like recurrent miscarriages or have birth trauma that come to me who want to do hypnobirthing, because something about the hypnobirthing is, and you can do that, you can do guided meditations or prepare the mind more if you are going through IVF or you're having problems with conceiving. And it's about what you put in your mind, your body reacts to. So a lot of people who have like anxiety and depression may have lots of aches and pains in their body. And something about the hypnobirthing, and something that I actually do, I'm not pregnant and I've never had a baby before, but I do lots of mindfulness practice. So journaling, and something that I suggest to, I've worked with lots of midwives who may have had issues with trying to get pregnant, or they've and the more miscarriages they have or the more rounds of IVF they have, the more anxiety they have in their mind, which then causes tension in their body and then can have kind of a knock-on effect. And there was a girl I used to work with, God, a while ago now, and she'd had a few miscarriages, and I said, oh, have you thought about doing like affirmations and guided meditations? And I was like, just try it. You might think it's really stupid, but just give it a go, and you might feel like a bit of a dick saying out loud stuff that you don't really believe, but the more you say something, write it down and read it out loud to yourself every day, the more your brain kind of believes that's happening. It doesn't really know the difference between what's real and what's not. It's just what you say to yourself. So one thing I would say is if you are ruminating and you have ruminating thoughts about anything in life, especially if it's about conceiving and having troubles on that with that aspect of stuff, is like, go through some things and work out what it is that you think about the most, that you're concerned about, and flip those into a positive affirmation. You can chat GPT it, you can go on Google, flip that, and then stick them on post-it notes on your kettle, on your fridge, on the back of your door where the toilet is. And every single time you see them, you say them out loud. And naturally what will happen is you'll start to believe that more. That will allow your body to relax more. And there's something within hypnobirthing that I teach called the fear, tension, pain cycle. And it's what you think in your mind. If it's fear, for example, or anxiousness or worry, your body has a natural response to feel tense and feel discomfort, and that can cause inflammation and things like that. But if we can change the mind to calm, and we can change those negative words that we're using and ruminating to positive, then that will have a knock-on effect on the body, and that will allow the body to work more effectively. So then once you're doing the mindfulness stuff, it could be journaling, and I say, do it like a shit sandwich. Say something positive, say what you're grateful for, say something you're not happy about that day, and then flip it and go, well, if I hadn't have done my guided meditations, I would have thought about that a bit more frequently. Or if I hadn't have done the affirmations for the last 2 weeks, I would have really ruminated that for a lot longer. And I feel really happy with the steps that I've taken in the last few weeks. And it's just small little changes that you add in that have an effect on your body. And things like just walking, just going out for a walk, a 10-minute walk, even in the horrible weather, just putting a rain jacket on and going out for a walk can help you clear your mind.
It's so true, because we talk a lot about, like, we say to people doing IVF, doing egg freezing, those things are so important. Your mental space is just as important as your physical vessel that's doing the thing. And I'm sure it's the same for labor and delivery, for pregnancy, because
Yeah. I'm just thinking in my head, it's so interesting because I am typically an anxious person. And when you're saying all these things about putting post-it notes and saying things out loud, like I should be doing that on a day-to-day basis. And every day I'm like, okay, I'm going to try meditating. I'm going to try this. But then when I was going through the egg freezing process, I was good. I was like, I got this. It's easy. For some reason, that didn't trigger the anxiety in me. But from a day-to-day perspective, I definitely need to work on affirmations.
It's just a small thing. You don't have to give yourself too much pressure, like, oh my God, I need to meditate. Oh my God, I need to walk. Oh my God, I need to do all of these things. It's like, I'll just start off with the positive words, like 3 post-it notes around the house. And you then notice that you feel lighter and you feel better. And then you can start implementing the other stuff. And sometimes if I over plan, oh my God, I need to meditate every day. And oh my God, I need to do that. I'm never going to keep up. And then I go, well, I failed. And then I just stop. So it's just small things to add to your daily routine.
I like that.
Me too.
Because we're sort of in the realm of you talking about it already, can you explain to people listening who have never heard of the concept, what is hypnobirthing?
It's really hard to explain in a short kind of sentence, but it's basically, it sounds a bit hippie, but it's not. I wish it was called something different. You might have heard in Australia calm birth, which is similar, apart from it's got like, doesn't really do breathing techniques quite so much. But hypnobirthing all works around the consensus that your body is designed to give birth. We just need to facilitate it in doing that. So what's happening is there's so much fear around labor and birth. That is what is causing the pain and causing the stress around it. So hypnobirthing looks at like what is going on within the body. What is your uterus? What is your cervix? Where is your baby? How is your baby feeding? What does that look like? And then it's looking at some of the fears. So what are you worried about? Is it, how do you get an epidural and it's safe? What does a cesarean section look like? What does this look like? And it's breaking down those fears and talking about them, because often it's hearsay or what you've seen off the TV. And when you actually talk it in full with a qualified person, that then enables you to go, oh, right, I understand why I might want that. And some hypnobirthing teachers are not midwives, some are, but I think because I'm a midwife, I've got the medical like aspect, which I understand, and then also the holistic aspect. But it's tapping into those subconscious conditioned beliefs that we have about ourselves and about labor and birth. And the older we are, the more conditioned beliefs we have, those set beliefs. And it's using guided meditations repeatedly from 26, 28 weeks as much as possible. And during the hypnotic part is it's changing with the positive language within the guided meditations and the visualizations within the guided meditations. It's changing your outlook on birth so you feel excited and happy and looking forward to it. And then the next part is breathing techniques, how you facilitate the uterus to work effectively via doing breathing techniques. And then I do lots of things around anchors like smell, touch, your environment, how important that is. So it's just education that's very, very simple, but it's small things that you add into your daily habits that create a safer space in your mind so that you're not fearful going into labor and birth. And no matter what birth you have, people think it's only a home birth, but it's not. Even if you have a cesarean section, you can have a hypnobirthing cesarean section. It's about how you feel. So it's about advocating for yourself, informed choice. And at the end of any birth that you have, because all of my clients have had a different birth, whether that's a home birth or an emergency section, they all at the end say, everything that I did was the best for us at that point, and I'm really happy with the outcome. There's no birth trauma associated with it. They're happy with it. And that's what I want, to reduce birth trauma, basically, because it's so high at the moment.
It is really high. I actually had a friend who had a baby last night, and the text I got was, I don't think I can ever do that again. That was horrible. So it definitely has that, birth has that stigma around it right now.
At what point in pregnancy should people start to do this educational process? Like, when is that, at what point from finding out you're pregnant to thinking about your birth, when should we start planning for that birth experience?
The first 12 weeks, you're very tired. So it's just kind of doing small things like going for a walk and stuff like that. But you don't have to necessarily start education as early as that. I usually start it around 26 to 28 weeks because they've had their anomaly scan, which is their 20-week scan, which checks all of the baby's main organs and things like that. So we kind of know what pathway they're on, whether they need to see doctors or whether they can just see a midwife, that kind of thing. So I start it around 26, 28 weeks. I do the next session at 32 and then the next session around 35, 36. But everyone does it slightly differently. The reason why I separate it is 9 hours of teaching is a lot to do in the space of 2 days. And a lot of people will do it over a weekend at 30 weeks. And then they're like, by the time they get to 40 weeks and they're having a baby, they're like, I can't remember any of the stuff. So something that I do is I have this prolonged period of time over 12 weeks where they can contact me. We can have little debriefs after their appointment. And then we have 3 3-hour sessions where I give them tasks to do in between, and it keeps them accountable so that they know that they have to do stuff, because they're like, shit, I've got Sydney on in a week and I haven't done this and I haven't done that. So it's a bit like having a PT, keeping you accountable.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like that. I feel like for a lot of people, I think you're right. There's a lot of fear around birth. And I think just equipping yourself with whatever you can to go into that experience feeling the best you can is probably going to result in the best outcomes. I'm sure that's what the data shows. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And you mentioned it can be at home birth, C-section. With your hypnobirthing, is the goal to have someone give a natural birth, no epidural, hopefully avoid a C-section? Or is it all just about the mindset no matter what it is?
I mean, it's a bit of both. It's instilling women in in confidence in their own abilities to birth. So instilling them that their body was designed to give birth, and changing those conditioned beliefs. And then once those conditioned beliefs are changed and they do feel positive and happy, it's like, okay, no, I know this is normal. I can do this. This is a physiological pain, not pathological pain. It's something that body's designed to do, and it's not I've broken a bone or anything like that. However, it's also being open to stuff. So a lot of, as a midwife, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when hypnobirthing started to become a little bit more trendy, like in the UK, women would come in and they haven't done any education. They've just gone online and printed a birth plan, and they've written, and they don't really know what those things mean, but they're like, do not want this, do not want that, do not want this. And our brain doesn't listen to the not, it's just listening to the do. And it's like, okay, I do not want an epidural, and that's saying epidural, cesarean section. And then what happens is women become really, really anxious, and they say they don't want something so much that it means that they end up having all of those things that they don't want. And that is what causes the birth trauma, because they go, I'm really disappointed that I didn't get that. I feel like I wasn't well equipped. I'm really sad that I made that decision. And that's really shit. Like, I don't want anyone to feel like that. So something I do within my hypnobirthing course is I go, okay, you might not want to have a cesarean section, but look at the death and the illness rate nowadays with women and babies compared to in the 50s. It's so much lower. So medical intervention is there when we need it, and we should be really grateful for that. So I always say, look, you've got a preferred, so I call it birth preferences rather than plan. And next to everything within the preferences, I just put, if they're not keen on it, I'll just put open to with discussion. You know the pros and cons. I've gone over it with you now, and you can go into your labor and birth saying, I'm open to everything, because I don't know how I'm going to feel at that moment. And then the woman at the end is like, well, Sydney taught me that if I have it at this time, how to personalize it to me so it works more effectively. So it's things like that. So yes, it is wanting that perfect birth that everyone wants, but it's also, no matter what birth you have, you're open to everything, and you're really happy at the end of it.
Yeah, I think that's really cool, because that's like life, isn't it? Like, you can have preferences on the way that things are going to go down, but there's some aspects of life that you don't have a great amount of control over. And when a medical necessity comes up, if you are more in the headspace of being okay with being open to intervention, I'm sure it's a lot easier to digest than just going through it and then being traumatized after the fact. So that is really special. And hope, like, you're right, the birth trauma rates are currently through the roof. So if there is a way for these women and people and their support people and their partners to equip themselves to better cope, I think that's incredible. So thank you for doing this stuff.
Yeah. And going off of that, what are some other misconceptions about giving birth?
Nowadays, we're so organized as a society, and women are very much, they know what they want all of the time. And something that they think they can do is plan everything around what date they're going to give birth on, and they get very fixated on that. And it's very sporadic when birth happens. We never really know when it's going to happen. It's about succumbing to the fact that you've just got to allow things to happen when they want. So what's now happening is women are going, I'm going to have an induction because I've got a set date, but they don't then understand the repercussions of that and the domino effect of intervention. So I think that people are going, yeah, brilliant, we can plan everything, but they're not then going, shit, what does that then mean for me and my mental state after the birth? What are those plans and specifics, like strict specifics, going to entail, and what's that going to mean for me and my baby and how my birth goes?
Mhm.
I think a surprising amount of people, and maybe it is from film, television, TV, think that to give birth, you're lying down, your legs are up in stirrups, and you have an epidural on board and you can't feel anything.
I have like men, mums, sisters. I have always asked for the birth partners to be involved because I want the birth partners to be their advocate. And when you've got partners saying, oh, well, yeah, well, they do give birth on their back and lift your legs up and scream and heave. And I'm just like, that's not actually what it has to be like. Although in England, it's something like 69% of women give birth on their back. But if you imagine you've got a bump, okay, would you poo on your back? Would you lie down pooing? No, it's gravity. The more upright and open you are, the less weight you've got on your pelvis. So when you're lying on your back, your bump pushes on your pelvis, which then shortens the diameter of the pelvis, which means the head can't get through as easily because there's less space. But if you stand up and you're leaning over, it's a bit like that. The head just has to come down. There's gravity there, and the uterus does what it's designed to do. And people don't realize that the uterus is a muscle, and its aim is to push the baby down. We don't have to go and push that. You don't have to do that. And if you have an epidural, you can't feel it. And that's where on the back, I've got to tell you when you need to push. And then that's where the also birth trauma comes in, is because women don't have that mind body connection. They don't even think that baby's theirs when it's up there on the chest, because they're like, what the hell has just happened? Like, I didn't even know that was going on. So yeah, I think that obviously doing it all naturally is ideal, but it doesn't matter if that doesn't happen. But there's things that you can do with an epidural, like turn it off when you know you're getting close to the end, or reduce it or pause it. And that then enables you to get on your knees more because you can move your legs more freely. That enables you to move positions. That enables you to feel when you're getting your contractions, so you know when you want to start doing that bearing down. So there's ways in which you can tailor all of those medical interventions to make them more personalized.
Yeah, I remember a good friend of mine was saying that she had had an epidural, and the midwife was encouraging her to push into a certain area of her body, but she couldn't feel that. She couldn't understand where she needed to push because she couldn't feel it. So they turned the epidural down. They started putting ice on the area that they wanted her to push towards. And she's like, finally, my brain turned on. And she just said within about 3 pushes, her baby was out, because she was like, I understood, I could feel it. And I just went, that's where I need to push to get my baby out. And
Yeah.
it's just so crazy that
That's
it was
crazy.
that sort of, not simple, but like she just said, I could not, my brain was disconnected from the bottom half of my body. So I didn't know what needed to be done.
Yeah, and that's why intervention happens. And that's why a lot of forceps, when you have an epidural, that can then lead to more intervention, because women aren't aware that, oh, they just go, I need an epidural. I don't want pain. I'm going to press it as much as possible because I don't want to feel anything. And then they don't then ask the questions around, what are the implications of that? What does that lead on to? So yeah, it's interesting. It's hard though. It's so, like, people go, how do you do 9 hours of teaching? And I'm like, honestly, sometimes I run over. People have so many questions around different things, and it all links differently. And it's so hard because there's so much online now that people read that might not be quite true or might be true, and you just never know what to believe anymore.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I think I saw you say on your social media on a post that, like, we are designed to have babies. So even if we were in a coma, our body would have the ability to potentially birth a child, because the uterus is a muscle. It's what
Wow.
it's built to do. Is that right?
This is how I explain it to my clients. So you've got your baby inside your tummy. Your uterus has got vertical muscles and horizontal muscles. And the uterus, when the baby is there, gets really large, obviously, to house the baby. And as the baby starts to drop down during the contractions, I call them waves, during the waves, the vertical muscles go up. It thickens the top rim of the uterus, and then the horizontal muscles in the lower segment of the uterus start to soften and thin to allow space for the baby to come down. So that happens without you doing anything. So the only thing you need to facilitate is just deep breaths. So if you imagine the uterus as a muscle, it needs oxygen. And when you start to panic, the uterus gets tense, the abdominal muscle gets tense, the baby gets reduced oxygen, and that's where it can lead on to more intervention. But if you breathe, it relaxes the uterus more, it relaxes the area where the uterus is, creating more space and allowing the uterus to do what it needs to do. So you can breathe your baby out. I've watched women breathe, and yes, intermittently bear down, just like if you're going to vomit, the body naturally goes like that. Just like when you're having a poo, your body naturally squeezes out with peristalsis. It's just the same. Giving birth, if you know what's going on and you're upright and open and walking, you've got gravity helping bring the baby down, the uterus pushing the baby down. All you have to do is relax the muscles around the perineum within the vagina to allow the baby to come out easier. And that reduces risks of tearing, risks of bleeding if you're not tearing. So there's lots of associated risks with the bearing down and pushing because it's so much pressure on the perineum and that area and on the baby's head.
With all of this, does it reduce time in labor?
So induction of labor often comes with a prolonged labor. And laboring naturally often comes with a more reduced labor. So on average, like 8 to 10 hours in the UK from active labor to having a baby when you go into labor naturally. And then when you've got an induction, it could be up to 12 hours on average. And you labor more effectively and efficiently when you've got higher oxytocin, which is your love and your happy hormone. So if you labor at home, you're more likely to labor more effectively because you're at home in your home comforts. But if you're an induction of labor and you're in a hospital environment where it's quite clinical, often your anxiety can be higher than if you were at home. And that is what can impact it, because oxytocin is what brings on your contractions and the regularity of the contractions.
It's so fascinating because it all just kind of links back to that, like, we are biologically made to do this process, which is just so fascinating because and rightly so, medical intervention has come in and it has saved many lives and helped many babies enter the world.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show that we are built to do it, and if we can put those two models together, you can have an amazing birth experience. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really is.
And then you mentioned earlier too, partners being involved and you want the male involved in the birth. What are some of the ways that they can be involved?
One of them is literally doing the course. I always say this is the first step, because as soon as you're doing the course and you're understanding what your partner's preferences are, you can advocate for them. And it's all about feeling safe. If the woman feels safe during birth, a bit like animals in the wild, they give birth in the dark under a tree with their pack around them. They feel safe. They eat their placenta and then they go to hide from predators. And we're just the same as cavemen and women. We want to feel safe. And if we feel safe, our body labors more effectively. And if we feel like we can turn off the overactive switching part, like turning that, oh God, I must control everything, and just switching off and breathing and going, do you know what? My partner knows exactly what I want. We've gone over everything. That is one of the ways that will really help a woman. But also I do stuff like back massage, what they can do to help counter pressure, things like that. Setting up the environment for the woman to make them feel more comfortable and calm. Could be talking about, skin to skin process, how that helps, skin to skin with the dad, understanding what might happen in different emergencies and what that looks like. And then the dad isn't then sat on his phone in the corner, terrified. He's like, okay, we talked about this. Yes, I feel slightly anxious. However, I'm more equipped because I understand the process much more. So that's one major thing in them helping, is being involved during all of the education that the woman is doing during the pregnancy.
We talk a lot about how through the IVF process, especially, that the partner has little to do. They kind of leave their sperm and go, and they feel so helpless and uninvolved.
Yes.
So and I'm sure pregnancy is similar. You're watching the person you love carry your child, and you don't have a lot of the burden on yourself. You don't have the fatigue. You don't have the physical weight of carrying it around. And so to try and involve yourself and advocate for your partner is such a special thing, because it's one of the biggest things you can do for them once they finally get to that end of their pregnancy and ready to bring the baby into the world.
Some men, even if they're really, they haven't done any education, but they really care about the woman. If the woman is worrying about the man, the woman can't labor effectively. If the woman's partner is fainting in the corner, they start stressing about that, and then that can affect their labor and birth. And it all interlinks. And I don't think people realize how much it all interlinks by even just who you've got in the room and what your room feels like.
I don't know how it is everywhere, and it might be different based off of this facility that you decide to give birth, or maybe you're doing it at home and it's different. Do most places just allow one support person to be in a birth, or is it completely dependent on different facilities?
So it's usually 2, but if
Okay.
anything, if the woman was to give birth in theatre, it's 1. Sometimes, say there might be like, I don't know, someone might have a relative that's unwell, and they want to have them, like, as in, like, on end of life or something like that, and they want them to be there as a third person. Or say a woman has a history of mental health disorders, and they want that third person to be there, and people might swap out, something like that. But it tends to be 1 to 2. And as I was talking about earlier with animals, we don't really want to feel looked at when we're giving birth. It's like being, I always say to women, it's like going to a spa, walking into a treatment room and the door being open, no
Yeah.
music, no nice smells, really bright room, and you're trying to relax with someone's hands all over your body with people walking past the room. It's really hard to relax in that scenario. You want it to be as reduced noise, not lots of people talking, not loads of people feeling like they're staring at you. You want to feel calm and relaxed in that space, and you want it to be a home from home. Like, as soon as you get to hospital, make that environment as much like home as possible.
I like that. That's all like amazing pieces of advice, because it makes so much sense in you being comfortable. Your body would be comfortable to do the
Mhm.
process that it's built to do. So interesting. And I'm sure that's why in those scenarios where maybe an emergency C-section or something comes up, that you lose a lot of the control around, the room does have to be brighter and more people need to be in there. And I guess that comes down to mentally preparing for that being a potential factor that could
Yeah.
come into it.
I have a question. I don't know exactly how to phrase it, but I guess you coming from a medical background, but also having this holistic approach, if someone is screaming for an epidural after X amount of hours, are you like, okay, let's do it? And then also, if someone needs a C-section, you're never gonna stop that and try and like rotate the baby or anything, or will you before it happens?
Women are never denied anything that they want. So if a woman requests something, the only thing that we do is we go through the risks. But that's the same in anything, whether you're pregnant or not. If you're being given a medication, they will talk you through the risks of that medication. But we would never deny anything unless it's too far gone. So say the head is there and someone asks for
Yeah.
an epidural. There's nothing we can do at that stage for it to work effectively. In terms of cesarean section, it's not about necessarily where the baby is rotated or not. It's whether the cervix is open. If the cervix is open and the head is fully down and they attempt to do some sort of forceps, it may lead to cesarean section. That's a discussion that the doctors will have. One of the best tools that I give anyone, and this is, like, one of my clients was using it in a bakery, and I'll talk to you about what it is, but it's the BRAINS acronym. So it's where you go into a conversation and you come out of that conversation more equipped to make an informed choice. And even if you're in an emergency, bearing in mind the most acute emergency is I guess a cesarean section, where we've got from decision to 30 minutes to have a baby, or round about that. And even though it can be very high paced, you can still ask questions as things are happening. So the B stands for, the acronym is BRAINS. The B stands for benefits. The R stands for risks. The A is alternatives. People say different things. I say instincts, like intuition, information. The N is nothing, and S is statistics. So if you're ever in a position where you don't understand what's going on, you don't have to be like, what are the benefits? What are the risks? But you can go, what are the pros and cons around that? Can we discuss why that might be a good idea, and discuss what that might lead to, the domino effect of intervention if I have that? Then, okay, you've told me all of the benefits and risks around that. Well, what's the alternatives? Do I have alternatives? Because normally, and the majority of the time, unless it's, oh my goodness, we are worried about the health of you and your baby right now, you have time to, or there may be alternatives, to discuss alternatives. Then you're going, okay, I've gathered all that information. I've asked for the statistics, because it's not just that might happen, or that's really likely to happen, or stillbirth is higher now. It's okay, well, what are the statistics around that? Because then I can make a logical decision based on the statistics, not just hearsay or words or terminology. And then the N is, okay, I've got all of that information. Either I'm going to do nothing and see how things go, or I'm going to do nothing for 24 hours and I'm going to come back with a decision based on my gut and my instincts from all of that information. And whether it's a 5-minute conversation in the room during your labor and delivery, or whether it's a 2-day conversation when you get home and you decide what you do, using that toolkit is really effective in making an informed choice and feeling like you're part of the decision-making process.
I mean, that's a kind of a good way to approach anything in life. I've never heard that acronym. I really like that. What advice would you give to someone who's sitting here right now listening to this podcast and they're feeling anxious about birth? They don't know where to start. They're just terrified, or maybe they're not even terrified. Maybe they haven't even given it thought, but they just don't know where to begin.
So my first thing would be to ideally come off socials or get rid of any negative. So anytime you see anything negative, just silence that. The next thing would be read books around pregnancy and hypnobirthing and education. And another one would be maybe just get a pen and paper and write down any thoughts that you have around birth, whether you want your birth to be a certain way, or what things that you're worried about, or things that people have talked to you about that are stuck in your mind. Then process those things. And if you don't have the ability to pay to do education, I would always advise going to your hospital to get some sort of free education, or any of the things that are on your list where you're like, God, those things really panic me. Ask your midwife. Can you do the brains acronym on those things? Can you tell me the statistics of these happening? Can you talk me through them? Because once you talk through lots of the aspects, they actually really neutralize in your mind and you feel much better about them. But if you can, whether it's an online course or whether it's a face-to-face course, a one-to-one tailored course is the best, but they're expensive. So if you can get an online course, and if you're feeling really anxious, you can do it as early as 24 weeks, do that. Honestly, education is key, and people go, oh no, I don't need to know anything. But if you went into an interview and you didn't know anything about the company you were getting an interview for, you would be terrified going in there, sweating, worried, anxious, and you're less likely to get it. You want to be prepared for labor so that you're more equipped to make decisions so you feel happier at the end of it. So education is key. And another thing is going to look at where, if they do tours in the hospital, oh my God, that's so much better, because then you know what the smell is like, you know what you can do with the room that equips you, so you go, oh no, I've been here before, we've done this. And something I say to the partners is, do a run through in the car. Where do you park? What do you need? How long's the walk? How do you get in there? So that reduces all of the anxiety around it as well.
Yeah, so it's less like a movie when you're rushing through all the stoplights to the hospital.
I actually had a friend in New York who was pregnant, and she said to me, she was like, we're going to get the subway. And I was like, what? And she was like,
She's right.
Yeah, she's like, we've tried other ways. We've decided that if it's
quicker.
peak hour, we're getting on the subway. And I was like, I wonder how many women in New York City have got the subway to birth.
That's smart and that's correct. The only thing is, what if the subway stops and you get stuck in the subway? Then you're birthing on the subway. I can't.
No, because if you think about it, I talked to you earlier about how long labor is. 8 hours.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
I'm sure we're going to have so many people listening that are working towards pregnancy or are blessed enough to be pregnant and are working towards birth. Where can they find you if their ears are ringing and they're like, this is my girl, I need her?
So I've got an Instagram called Serene Birthing, and it's on there. I've got like a little mini website at the moment. I do one-to-ones, which is 3-hour sessions, but in the next 4 to 6 weeks, I'm going to have an online course, which is going to be a quarter of the price, a lot more accessible, with the add-on of a one-to-one if people have specific concerns that they're not feeling like the generic online course is done. So yeah, website will be going live soon. I'm actually going to do a free webinar, or at least an hour's session in maybe April time. So if people want to join on that, it'll all be through my Serene Birthing socials.
This has been so fun.
So informative. It's so informative.
You have said everything to Alyssa that I have not known how to put into words to her.
Yeah.
Last night, she was so adamant. She's like, but I'm going to be laying on my back with an epidural.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not going to feel a thing. We're all good here.
I was like,
it doesn't matter.
We'll change that, hon. When you're going to have a baby, let me know, and I'll hook you up, and we'll get you a home birth with a pool in the sitting room.
Thank you so much
for having me. Thank you.